Hello, welcome back. In this video, we are going to see what is international trade and if there are benefits to it. We shall also compare it with protectionism, where free trade is restricted. Let's get started. Let's see some key terms which are relevant here. First one being the international trade. Exchange of goods and services between countries is called international trade. And it plays a crucial role in economic development and prosperity of nations. So they would be able to access wider variety of goods and services which they cannot produce domestically, and it fosters economic interdependence among nations. And globalization is very related to international trade. Globalization refers to the process of increased interconnectedness. So between different countries, if we have interconnectedness, that is globalization, and it would infer that we have interdependence among countries, economies, cultures, and societies around the world. So international trade is the harbinger of economic globalization. So if we do international trade, that means that we are involved in economic globalization. Let's go through a scenario. Mr. X is a manager in a multinational firm. He is very sharp, very productive, intelligent, and very practical. He is so methodical that he can work in multiple areas at the same time. Should he be doing all the jobs which are there and take the responsibility of everything? Let's say he starts doing everything himself and he gets involved everywhere. Will it be for his benefit or shall he be doomed? Won't you say that he's better off giving guidance and effective monitoring instead of starting everything hands-on? This is essentially the theory of competitive advantage. So the countries would focus on the items or on the produce where they have competitive advantage, and they shall focus on their strengths. Let's see it in details. So the theory of comparative advantage was given by David Ricardo in 1817. The theory explains how the countries can benefit from specialization and trade, even when one country is less efficient in producing the goods. So, which means that if there is a trade between two countries, how they can have benefits even when one of the countries is not efficient, still both the countries would be able to benefit, mutually benefit from trade. We shall see it in much detail in the later part of the video. The theory of comparative advantage demonstrates that even if one country is less efficient in producing all goods and services compared to another country, both countries can benefit from trading based on their relative efficiencies. And what it does, it favors international trade as it promotes resource allocation, specialization, and effective use of resources on a global scale. By following this principle, countries can enhance their economic welfare and prosperity through mutual cooperation and exchange. Let's see it with an example. We have Portugal and England, and we are seeing here that in Portugal, 80 man can produce 8,000 gallon of wine, let's say in X amount of time. Wherein in England, 8,000 gallon is produced by 120 men in the same X amount of time. Similar thing for cloths also. So 90 man can produce 9,000 yards of cloth here. And in case of England, it is 100 man which produce the similar amount of cloth in the similar time. Now we can see that the efficiency of Portugal illustrated in this example is more. So will it be the case that if we produce everything in Portugal, would it be more beneficial, or if there is a trade between these two countries, it shall be helpful? Let's see further. Now let's see the example where both the countries are working independently. Assume that each country has 1200 men, and wine producing, we have put 700 men for wine production and 500 men for cloth production. Now for production of wine, so in case of Portugal, so 80 man produce 8,000 gallon. So one man would produce 8,000 divided by 80, and 700 man would produce 700 into 8,000 divided by 80, which is 70,000 gallons. Same is the case with cloth, it is 50,000 yards. In case of England, the numbers become 46,000 and 45,000 respectively. If I add everything, the production from Portugal plus England, if I add, then the total wine is 70,000, which is this, and 46,666, which is here, and it leads to this, and total cloth leads to this. Now let's say that both the countries have trading treaties and they work towards their own comparative advantage. So Portugal produces just wine. Okay, so how much wine it will be able to produce? It will be able to produce 120,000 gallons of wine with the similar calculation which we had done earlier. So all the 1200 men in this case are producing wine. In case of England, the cloth production becomes 108k. Okay, and what had we seen earlier? This is the moment of truth. So earlier we had seen if they were doing independent work, they were producing way less. So they were producing total cloth 95,000 and total wine 116,666. So we have seen it very clearly that with this kind of trading treaties, if the countries are working on their comparative advantages, both the countries can trade and both can mutually benefit. So that's the comparative advantage, which was the theory given in 1817. Now, the opposite of comparative advantage, which mean open trade or globalization, is protectionism. So, what is protectionism? So, protectionism is an economic and trade policy that aims to shield a country's domestic industries and business from foreign competition. So, what it'll do? It'll counter the free flow of goods, services, capital, and information across national borders. Protectionist measures are typically implemented by whom? By the government. Okay, and how they have these measures? They include tariffs, which are import taxes, trade barriers. So trading they would not allow, or they would be putting some barriers that only this amount of some good can be imported. So those are trade barriers. Subsidies shall be given to domestic production. So thereby they are able to sell it for cheap because subsidies are given. And there could be some regulations which could be forced on the imports, thereby reducing the import and thereby leading to protectionism. Finally, let's see the summary of what we discussed. So comparative advantage is closely associated with free trade, which is seen as beneficial, whereas tariffs closely correspond to restricted trade or protectionism. The theory of comparative advantage helps to explain why protectionism is typically unsuccessful. So this is what is the explanation why globalization, offshoring, getting cheap labor, getting manufacturing shifted to cheap labor countries shall be helpful for the mutual benefit of two different countries. That's what this theory is all about. Thank you very much.